మిమ్మల్ని ఎప్పుడైనా ఎవరైనా ఎందుకు ఈక్విటీస్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేస్తున్నామని క్వశ్చన్ అడిగారు అనుకోండి, వాళ్ళకి ఈ వీడియోలో షేర్ చేసే డేటాని షేర్ చేయండి. అండ్ ఒకవేళ మీ ఫ్యామిలీ మెంబర్స్కి ఎందుకు మన ఇండియన్ ఈక్విటీ మార్కెట్స్లో లాంగ్ టర్మ్కి ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలని మీరు అవేర్నెస్ క్రియేట్ చేయాలనుకున్నారనుకోండి, ఈ వీడియో చూపించడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి. అండ్ మీకే ఎప్పుడైనా ఒకవేళ మార్కెట్ పడినప్పుడు, ఇప్పుడు మార్కెట్ పడుతుంది కదా, అలాంటి కరెక్షన్స్ వచ్చినప్పుడు అనిపిస్తుంటుందన్నమాట, ఎందుకు మనం ఈక్విటీస్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలి, ఈక్విటీస్లో డబ్బులు తీసి వేరే దగ్గర పెట్టుకుందాం అని చెప్పి అనిపించినప్పుడు, అలా ఫియర్ క్రియేట్ అయినప్పుడు ఈ వీడియోని తప్పకుండా చూడండి. ఎందుకంటే బికాస్ ఈ వీడియోలో షేర్ చేసే డేటా ఏదైతే ఉన్నదో, ఈ డేటా మీకు లాంగ్ టర్మ్ మైండ్ సెట్, ఎందుకు ఈక్విటీస్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలి, అది కూడా ఇండియన్ ఈక్విటీస్లో లాంగ్ టర్మ్కి ఎందుకు ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలన్నా మైండ్ సెట్ ప్రిపేర్ చేసుకోవడానికి హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అవుతుంది. అండ్ ఇన్ఫాక్ట్ ఈ డేటా యాక్చువల్లీ చాలా రియాలిటీ ఇది. కాకపోతే మనం రోజుల్లో ఏదైతే చాలా వేరియస్ న్యూస్లు ఉంటాయో ఆ న్యూస్లో పడి మనం ఈ లాంగ్ టర్మ్ పిక్చర్ని మర్చిపోతుంటాం. వేరేస్ ఇండియాలో జరుగుతున్న మ్యాజిక్ ఏదైతే ఉన్నదో ఆ మ్యాజిక్ మొత్తం మీకు ఈరోజు ఈ వీడియోలో క్లియర్గా తెలుసుకోబోతున్నారు. సో ఈ డేటాని మీరు కాన్సన్ట్రేట్ చేసి వినడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి, మీకు చాలా చాలా హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అవుతుంది. అండ్ ఈ డేటా మనకి అంబిట్ వాళ్ళు షేర్ చేయబోతున్నారు. అంబిట్ క్యాపిటల్ ఈజ్ నోన్ ఫర్ డీప్ డేటా షేరింగ్. వీళ్ళు చాలా డీప్ రీసెర్చ్ డేటా షేర్ చేస్తుంటారు. కాకపోతే అంబిట్ వాళ్ళు ఓన్లీ హెచ్ఎన్ఏ, సూపర్ హెచ్ఎన్ఏ అంటే బాగా డబ్బున్న వాళ్ళకే ఈ డేటా షేర్ చేస్తుంటారు. సో వాళ్ళు ఏదైతే డేటా షేర్ చేస్తున్నారో ఆ డేటాని మీ వరకు తీసుకురావడానికి మేము పెట్టిన ప్రయత్నంలో భాగంగా అంబిట్ వాళ్ళని తీసుకొచ్చి ఇంటర్వ్యూ చేస్తున్నాం. ఇంటర్వ్యూలో మిస్టర్ సిద్ధార్థ రస్తోగి, ఈయన ప్రిన్సిపల్ ఆఫీసర్, సిఓఓ అండ్ అంబిట్ ఒక ఎండి. ఈయన ఈ డేటాను మనకి షేర్ చేయబోతున్నారు. చాలా బాగా షేర్ చేశారు. అండ్ నాకైతే ఇంటర్వ్యూ బాగా అనిపించి, యాక్చువల్లీ నేను ఏదైతే టైం అనుకున్నానో ఆ లిమిట్ కన్నా యాక్చువల్లీ ఇంటర్వ్యూ ఎక్స్టెండ్ అయిపోయింది అనమాట. ఎందుకంటే ఇంటర్వ్యూ అంత బాగా వెళ్ళింది. అండ్ స్టెప్ బై స్టెప్ ఈ వీడియోని అయితే మాత్రం మీరు కాన్సన్ట్రేట్ చేసి చూడడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి. వీడియో ఇనీషియల్గా డేటా ఎక్కువ ఉంటుంది కాబట్టి మీకు కొంచెం స్లోగా అనిపించవచ్చు, బట్ కానీ దాని తర్వాత ముందుకు వెళ్ళే కొద్దీ యాక్చువల్లీ ఏదైతే ఇంట్రెస్టింగ్ పాయింట్స్ వస్తుంటాయో ఆ పాయింట్స్ మీకు చాలా హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అవుతాయి. సో వీడియో చివరి వరకు చూడడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి, మీకు చాలా హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అవుతుంది. అండ్ మేము ఇలాంటి యాక్చువల్లీ ఎవరైతే మార్కెట్లో ఉన్న ఎక్స్పర్ట్స్ ఉంటారో ఆ ఎక్స్పర్ట్స్ మీ వరకు తీసుకొచ్చి ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ మీ వరకు రీచ్ చేయడానికి ఏదైతే ఎఫర్ట్ పెడుతుందో ఎఫర్ట్ మీకు హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అయింది అని వీడియో చూసినప్పుడు ఎప్పుడైనా అనిపించినట్టయితే వీడియోని అప్పుడే లైక్ చేయడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి, సో దట్ యాక్చువల్లీ ఎంకరేజింగ్గా అనిపిస్తుంది. అండ్ అలాగే ఈ వీడియో మీ ఫ్రెండ్స్ అండ్ ఫ్యామిలీ మెంబర్స్ హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అవుతుందంటే వీడియో మొత్తం చూసిన తర్వాత వాళ్ళకి తప్పకుండా షేర్ చేయండి. అండ్ అలాగే ఈ వీడియో మొత్తం చూసిన తర్వాత నేను ఒక 2 years బ్యాక్ ఒక వీడియో చేశాను సిమిలర్ టాపిక్తోని మన ఛానల్లోని. ఆ వీడియోని తప్పకుండా చూడడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి. ఎండ్ కార్డ్లో ఉంచుతాను, ఇది తమ్నేల్ అన్నమాట, ఎండ్ కార్డ్లో ఉంటుంది. ఆ వీడియోని తప్పకుండా చూడడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి. లెట్ మీ ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ మిస్టర్ సిద్ధార్థ రస్తోగి నౌ. Thank you, Mr. Siddharth, for giving us this opportunity. Ambit is known for a lot of deep data sharing. I'm sure my subscribers will have a lot of data to learn. And once again, thanks a lot for giving us this opportunity.
So pleasure is all mine, Sai. What we see is a transition. We are at the base camp. We yet have to reach the summit. And that's the journey we are talking about. From here, in a decade, lots for the investors, lots for the economy, lots for the underprivileged, because whole bunch of people, whole bunch of households are actually going to migrate from abject poverty into middle class and upper middle class. So yes, what we see is only the tip of the iceberg, the 10%. The 90% which is underneath, nobody sees it. And that has been work in progress, not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but for whole 30 years. And I'm going to run through that journey quickly so that people can understand, your viewers can understand how India has been working on it, not by design, but by providence and default.
Awesome. Even I'm excited to see that, because $10 trillion government itself is saying 5 trillion, but Ambit is saying India will reach $10 trillion. So I want to see what data you're speaking about. Let's start the presentation, Mr. Siddharth.
Sure. So what we are talking about is not only 10 years, we are talking about Indian history has been very, very old, 5,000 years old. But somewhere we lost in between. For last 1,000 years, we didn't realize our own inner strength. We didn't realize what capabilities Indians had, and we were just looking towards the West. But in last 30 years, 75 years of independence, first 45 years, we just took to modify ourselves. We adapted to survive. But next 30 years, from 91 onwards till 2021, the growth which India has made has been tremendous. And that's what we are going to talk about: reclaiming glory, reclaiming history. So there is a very famous Roman Ronald. He was a Nobel Prize winner, a French dramatist and art historian. And he said, and remember at that point in time, we were still under the British rule. He said, if there is one place on the face of the earth where all dreams of the living men have found a home from the very earliest days when man began the dream of existence, it's India. It's our motherland. It's our homeland. If we look at the trajectory to a $10 trillion economy, let's look at who all have achieved it. Let's first talk about where we stand today. At this point in time, so everybody knows, and that's general knowledge. Nominally, India is a $2.9 trillion economy. We hit the $3 trillion mark in February of 2020. Unfortunately, after that, COVID happened and economy shrunk in FY21 by 7.2%. Today, we are back from the ashes and ready to roar. And we are at $2.9 trillion economy. And we are the fifth largest economy nominally in the world. There are only 4 economies who are above us: US, China, Japan, and Germany. Out of these, only 2 economies till now have achieved the feat of a $10 trillion economy. US, which is over $20 trillion economy now, and China, which is over $14.5 trillion, $15 trillion economy now. If I look at Japan, it's $5 trillion plus. So our next destination, our next milestone, only 3 economies in the world in the history of humankind have achieved. Germany is just some distance away. I'm very, very sure that we are going to cross this distance. But remember, for all these 4 economies to cross and become the largest 4 economies, the journey hasn't been smooth. The journey hasn't been single-sided. It has been a series of ups and downs. And it starts from the very beginning of the 20th century when Germany got butchered, Germany got thrashed badly in the Second World War. 1944, 1945, Germany was literally finished. It was in ruins. A decade later, the industrial growth in Germany again hit a double-digit mark. Then the unification of East and West Germany came. In no time, in last 20 years, 25 years, Germany has unified Europe, emerging as the leader, emerging as the mother Germany now. From a fatherland, it has become, thanks to Miss Merkel, it has become, for last 20 years, Miss Merkel has been at the helm of affairs, and it has become the mother Germany, feeding all the unified Europe as and when they need it. US, after the Second World War, had a great run. They created WHO. They were the most powerful nation in UN. The GATT, the WHO, the WTO, all of them were organized largely by United States. They had a great run. Then the dot-com bubble happened. Then the Asian crisis happened. Then the 9/11 happened. 2008 happened. They went through ups and downs, but they still remain one of the most powerful nations in the world, the reserve currency for last 100 years. Will it change? That's another topic we'll discuss some other day. But for now, the third economy, China. China was in 70s and 80s, went through huge famines, huge challenges. From an agrarian economy, they moved to become the manufacturing hub of the world.
True.
And from with the arrival of the 21st century, they quickly jumped from becoming less than $2 trillion economy, which they stayed in entire 20th century, to become a $2 trillion economy. And from a $2 trillion economy, in a matter of next 5 years itself, they became a $5 trillion economy. And then there was no looking back. And they kept progressing, crossing the $10 trillion mark. Japan, again, one of the victims of the Second World War, totally destroyed, totally destructed, almost in the ashes. They resurrected. They literally resurrected from the ashes, and today they are a force to reckon with. They grew massively for 40 years, but for last 30 odd years, the growth has been modest, the growth has been slowed down. So if you look at the upper chart, which very clearly defines the journey of a $10 trillion mark, you can see the steep curve, which China achieved a $10 trillion mark very, very, very quickly. However, US took relatively larger number of years, and similarly for Japan, which after a point in time got stagnated. If you look at the China's just 50 years back was totally an agrarian economy, something like India. So India today, although the GDP terms, we are only contributing 22% from the agriculture in real terms. However, 40% of India's population is surviving, is dependent on agrarian economy. So it's a very, very large number. And if you look at China also was similar. But over the years, if you see, their share in services didn't happen all of a sudden. It actually gradually expanded. And if you look at the transition, in 1953, the manufacturing was 21%. And by 2001, it was 46%. That's the interesting part, that they didn't jump onto the service, unlike United States of America, which moved from a totally agrarian, because on the arrival of the 20th century, most of the economies were largely agrarian, with little bit only United States and Germany, not even Germany and France, they being under the large influence of Industrial Revolution. Rest all the economies across the world were largely agrarian economy. And US moved directly from the agrarian into the service sector. Today, nearly 72% of the GDP is coming from services sector, and nearly 70% of people are in the service sector, directly or indirectly. India, if you look at, still remains largely a agrarian economy. However, the interesting part is service sector, which only employs less than 20% of the workforce in India, contributes over half of the GDP. And that's the beauty. So we are also following somewhat the footsteps what United States of America took. The only challenge is one. There's a little bit of challenge, and I want to explain it to you. The challenge is that the population of India is 138 crores, while the population of United States of America today stands at 32 crores, 33 crores, 34 crores, right?
Yeah.
And if you have, and we have demographic dividend, we have younger population. However, the bigger challenge lies if you have such young population, and if they do not have jobs, what will happen to the economy? And hence, India necessarily needs to pivot into the manufacturing plus services. It cannot become a $10 trillion economy until and unless it becomes the manufacturing hub. And thanks to all the geopolitical situations which are happening across the world, and especially in last 24 months, India is getting that prowess of manufacturing back. We'll talk about it in further slides as well. Now, let's look at it. What we are talking is just a dream, is just a daydream, or is just fantasy, or can it really happen? So what it will, so I mentioned in the conversation that we are at 2.8, $2.9 trillion economy. So let's assume we are at $2.9 trillion economy today. If we need to achieve a $10 trillion mark, we need to grow nominally, which means real economy, real GDP growth plus inflation to the tune of 14-15% compounding. If we
Okay.
grow for next 10 years at 14-15% compounding, we will hit the $10 trillion mark in next 10 years. If I hit a 15%, then it is 10 years. If I do a 14%, then it is 11 and a half years. So the maths is around 10 to 11 years, between 14 to 15%. That's the simple fundamental which you have to understand, which you have to think.
The left chart which indicates that the number, right?
Absolutely.
The left top
So left chart, you can clearly see that in 10 years, if we keep growing at a 15%, it will take 10 and a half years from a 2.8. This data may be little dated because we don't have the exact GDP numbers. With the last numbers of the GDP, where the GDP grew handsomely well, my presumption is this 2.8 would have been very, very close to 2.9 or something like that. So all the starting point matters a lot, because that's what keeps compounding on a constant basis. So between 10 to 12 years is something which one can look at to achieve this $10 trillion mark in a rough manner.
Okay.
Now, have we done it in the past? The answer is yes. If I look at the growth from for a 5-year period or for a 10-year period, a lot of people believe that we can do it in 5 years, on 3 years, 4 years. Will it sustain over a 10-year period? The answer is yes. And we have achieved it from 2007 to 2012.
The right side chart, which is you're talking
about. That's the chart on the right hand side. Absolutely. On the right top, if you can see, from 2002 to 2012, we grew at 14% compounding, 3 to 13, 15%, and so on and so forth. So it's not that we have not done it in the past. We have done it consistently over a 10-year period. And that's what is the ask. It's not that we have to achieve something which is a 30% kind of a number. We have to achieve exactly what we have done it in the past. If I look at, just translate into from the economy into the economic barometer. Economic barometer essentially means the markets, the stock markets, the capital markets, which you all guys are interested in. So if I look at, the beautiful part is, whenever any economy moves from a $2.5 trillion to a $5 trillion economy. And why am I keep emphasizing this milestone of $5 trillion economy? Because that's a cusp. It's tough to get the momentum on till $5 trillion economy. But once you have set the momentum at $5 trillion economy, the process, the system, the entire framework is set. You just need to keep funneling in the resources, and the outcome will keep coming in. That's the beauty. And if I have to look at the analogies of US and China, which are $10 trillion economy or plus $10 trillion economy at this point in time, the United States of America attained this feat in a span of 10, 11 years, from 79 till 88. The year when the Sensex was born, that was the starting point, from 2.5 to $5 trillion economy. And the compounding happened merely at 7%. But look at the S&P 500, it compounded at 17% during the same period.
Awesome.
More than double the GDP growth. So if you have to put the analogy here, we are saying that 14%, 15% compounding nominally of the GDP, you can imagine, to extrapolate what can happen to the barometer of the economic growth. So that's number one. If I look at the China, which I spoke about, the China's growth trajectory has been very, very steep, and it made that jump from 2.5 to $5 trillion economy in a span of 5 years with a 20% compounding. And during the same period, the Shanghai index jumped by 28% compound. And that's
insane. Insane return, 28% CAGR. So, and we are in the same place now. So 2.9 to 5, that means we are in the same journey.
And we are just knocking the $5 trillion mark, because it's a matter of time. 3 years or 4 years at best. 3 years or 4 years. I don't think 4 years, but 3 years. By the way, there are two economies already, Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, which are poised, which are gearing up, gunning to become a $1 trillion economy. The Tamil Nadu and the Maharashtra, single-handedly, they are already set the framework. At the same time, Telangana and Andhra, they are both trying to become a $500 billion economy. So if you imagine 8-9 states between $500 billion and $1 trillion, very, very achievable.
True.
So another interesting data point, which I have to say, that the next leg of the US economy, which it moved from a $5 trillion economy to a $10 trillion economy, which happened from 88 to a 2000 for United States of America. The compounding of the Dow Jones has been at 14%. That's the beauty, which means whenever the economy will grow, you have to get the benefit out of it.
True. I have one question, Mr. Siddharth.
Yes.
Do we have the data of China as well from 5 to 10 trillion? The return part.
So China also, but China compounded at a very, very fast pace. China's so Shanghai index. So I have not captured the data here. Shanghai compounded above 20%. Now I didn't purposely put the data because that would have set the notion little differently. And remember, China is a communist nation. It's a controlled economy. Now they can move, they can pivot, they can make levers change very, very fast because they are a semi-autocratic kind of an economy. However, India is more, so India is the largest democracy in the world, and it replicates a mix of democracy and capitalism, which also is similar to United States. And that's why the analogy with United States is much, much better. So moving forward, what it means for the investors. Another interesting anecdote I would want to give is I kept on speaking about last 30 years.
Yes.
So it's a very interesting phenomenon that whenever reforms happen during that decade, the markets are generally benign. The next decade, the growth kicks in. The biggest revolutionary reforms which have happened in the history of India were from 91 to 2000. Reforms where liberalization happened, where the SLR, the statutory liquidity ratios, were brought down, and that's what freed up the banking money, the capital for lending. SEBI got formulated. The subsidies were reduced. Those were the times when you had, for the first time, market determined currency rate. That was a game changer. The deepening of the equity markets, capital markets, debt markets happened then. We talk about divestment. Today, divestment started back then.
Yes. Mr. Manmohan Singh and Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao.
Absolutely, absolutely. Under the anchorship of Mr. Narasimha Rao and with Dr. Manmohan Singh's smartness, we just revolutionized the entire thing. After that, but during that decade, the challenge is the index, the Sensex only grew by 286%, modest in 10-year period, compounding of 14.5%. But if I look at the next 10 years, nearly it's 1.7x to 2x the Sensex grew. And trust me, between 2000 to 2010, the reforms were very less, barring an RTI, which is right to information. And the reason is, when everything is going good, you will become complicit. You enjoy the benefit of the seed which you have sown years back. The reason why this lag is because of 4-5 reasons. So there is a traditional economic play of recognition lag, implementation lag, effect lag, so on and so forth. So there are 4-5 lags which ensure that whenever reform happens, it takes time to materialize. Similarly, the next set of big reforms which actually happened from 2010 to 2020, including demonetization, including digitization, including Jan Dhan accounts, which is 48 crores at this moment, GST implementation, and the one biggest thing which people don't realize is IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. That's the biggest game changer for the private sector. You can make honest mistakes and start a new life with complete genuinity. That's the beauty which IBC gave. Earlier, you didn't have. You had that baggage which continued with you forever and ever. The FDI norms in insurance, the FDI norms in food, retail, defense, all changed. And again, Sorry to say, but 2010 to 20, Sensex again didn't do anything meaningful. Only
Exactly.
132% returns in absolute terms, only 9% compounding. And you can imagine what lies ahead of you from 2021 to 2030.
30.
But the another interesting part, so this is the large cap. Let's look at what happened during incessant growth of 2001 to 2010, the decade after the reforms for the mid and small. So this is the data which is very, very interesting. So the mid cap actually grew by 764% over a 10-year period. And the small cap moved up by 10x, 980%. That's the power I'm talking about. And again, in the year of reforms, again, it slowed down, 247, 289%, very, very modest. So imagine across the length and the breadth of the market, what you can anticipate in 2021 to 2030.
30.
Another interesting data point I would tell you is, so just look at the bottom charts first. This is the beauty of it. The biggest gainers, whenever the transformation happens, are the small caps. So if you look at, if you have identified some of the small caps, which means between 500 to 1000, only 3% of the businesses actually become the large cap, which move between 101 to 250. And if they are able to move by chance, so none of them actually move to a 1 to 100%, but if some of them even move between 101 to 250, which is a typical mid cap, the compounding happens at a rate of 37%. That's the opportunity we are talking about. So if you're a conservative investor, don't worry, invest into the large cap. If you are a relatively balanced investor, invest in large, mid, small, all. If you have patience and if you have stomach to digest butterfly movements, get into the small cap. Money has to be made.
Yes. I have a couple of questions. One, you have touched upon the Chinese regulations which they have brought in. So, which all sectors you will see funding could come in because of the Chinese stringent regulations which are happening now?
Let me explain to you what is happening in the Chinese economy. The first thing, Chinese are getting unduly worked up because they believe, you understand that the metals, the mining, the raw material, always the China was the largest producer of it, right? We all know that. Barring oil, that does not come from there. Rest everything China. But the problem with that is only one-fold. The problem is you have the huge amount of climate problem which happens, and it happens locally. Forget around the world, forget about the earth. It happens locally because it happens in and around the area where you're doing the extreme mining. Second, the energy cost is huge. Although you are profitable, but the cost is huge. Now, what China is saying, why should I continue to grow at 10% and feed the world? I should cut down as much as I need domestically. And slowly and gradually they are withdrawing. So the first leg, if you look at 3, 4, 5 years back, they started with chemical reduction.
Yes.
And one of the biggest beneficiaries of this movement has been Indian chemical industry. And if you look at, forget COVID, from 2017 onwards, since the time China has realized that they need to cut down on the chemical production, all the companies have taken over. And chemical as a sector now is becoming a secular growth story. It's very interesting. Only one chemical company is in the Nifty 50. Only one. And the weight is 0.5%. My sense is in next 10 years, at least that number, that weight should be anything from 10% to 15%. So that's number one. Number two, metals and mining. Another area which I mentioned that it will start getting reduced slowly, gradually in China, and it will keep shifting into the other areas, including India. So India is again going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries. The third, which I already mentioned, any kind of internet businesses, any kind of platform businesses. Now, internet businesses, only makes sense if you're a platform. Because
Hmm.
remember, the world is very, very quickly moving to a phenomenon known as disintermediation. You look at the largest FMCG companies. Earlier, you had a company, then a national distributor, state distributor, wholesaler, retailer, all the value chain. COVID has taught, including the biscuit companies, to start retailing 10-15% directly B2C. I'm
Yeah.
willing to sell you something because the volumes have brought the logistic cost down tremendously. Domestic logistic cost. I'm not talking about the international supply
Hmm.
chain disruption where we have seen 5-7x growth in
Hmm.
terms of the pricing because of the shipment. So that's a different
Hmm.
issue. Domestic logistics, the volumes have reduced the pricing, and this intermediation very, very distinctly is spreading all across. So all the internet companies now are realizing that the business model is simple. I have to become a platform. I have to do the matchmaking, the buyers and sellers, the convenience.
Yes.
And that's why if you look at some of the biggest internet now unicorns are the ones which are just consolidating demand and bargaining with a large guy. So think about it, a construction material aggregation and then negotiating with a ACC cement that you give me 50 metric ton of cement and I will sell it to 30 builders, 50 builders. Now, that's what is going to happen, that the platformization will happen. And
Okay.
whichever company is into the robust platforms, they will be the winners. Now, the challenge is practically all internet companies are now getting into a platform. So earlier, maybe a Paytm was a technology company. Now it is a platform. It is doing
Yes.
everything what an Amazon is also doing. So Amazon is another platform. So you would see consolidation also happening therein. But my sense is very, very, very clearly that over a period of time, anything which is a platform will win. So that's the number three. Number four, discretionary demand. Now, what do you mean by discretionary demand? It essentially means what I like to spend. So what has happened is because of COVID, we all have been in the house for a very, very long period of time, 18,
True.
20 months.
True.
So all of a sudden, we have become lazy. We don't want to step out. We want to order everything. Although we can step out, now we don't want to step out for menial job.
Yes. Yes.
And when I start ordering, I always start ordering little extra. So earlier, maybe you look at your house, if an Amazon packet will come with one small box, now a carton comes with 30 things. Same Amazon, now 30 things or 10 things. The carton size has become bigger.
Bigger.
So that's what is going to happen, the discretionary demand. Second is your instant gratification. Now, because of so you understand, during COVID time, all the services were chopped. All the
Hmm.
services, any kind of service was not available, right? Whether
Hmm.
it is a
Hmm.
barber, whether it is
Hmm.
a hotel, whether it is food
Hmm.
chain, all kinds of services were shut.
Hmm.
So what people started doing, how do you get gratification? I started owning things. So I will buy a coffee machine, which earlier would have been in my office. I would buy a big coffee machine. I would buy an instant water heater. Earlier, I would use a gas, but not anymore. So people are now spending money because of the hyper demand on the discretionary items. So that's the
Okay.
fourth sector which is going to get benefited. Two more sectors very, very distinctly. One is the pharma and healthcare, because pharma and healthcare scare. So remember, because of COVID, all the other illnesses and you having more sedentary lifestyle because of COVID will only accentuate the problems. Earlier, there were only physical problems, but now because of the mental problems, the physical problems have only aggravated. So the healthcare and pharma will remain robust. The next, but not the least, is the insurance, both life and non-life, both life and non-life. Life, obviously, non-life as well, because people have seen that between a lower middle class to an abject poverty, you're just an illness away. And that's why mediclaim insurance has become the normal phenomenon. So I think
True.
these 5-6 sectors. Apart from that, very, very clearly, BFSI has to do well, because any economy, if you have to do well, the money circulation, the fin and the fintech companies, they have to do well, because what money is to the economy, your blood is to the body, right? And it's very interesting. Now the money flow, money supply is moving even more faster. So it's said that money in hand, which is the cash money, the cash money moves 3x, 3 times, and then it stops. The money in the bank moves 7 times, then it stops. The money, the digital money, moves 9 times. So that's the velocity of money. And very, very clearly, if you have huge demand, automatically your demand will at some point in time exceed your income levels as well. And hence you'll constantly borrow more. Your spouses will, your partners will push you to go for international holidays, and you have to borrow money to spend that money. So the lending activity, borrowing activity, NBFCs will hit the roof. By the way, we are at the lowest cycle of the credit. Yeah. We are at 5% credit offtake, which is 46 years low. So the only thing which can happen in the private sector credit is only going to go up from here.
Okay. Out of all the points, the second point I have a little discouraged, because metals, mining, I don't think many investors can make a lot of money over a long period, right? See, do you see long period return from that theme? Though maybe metals and mining companies might do a lot of business, but money making, I see it's a cyclicality, and I see many people in this bull market getting into that space, and it happens every bull cycle. They get stuck for a longer period of time. What's your take on that?
So Sai, what you said is absolutely correct. So metal is an opportunity which is cyclical in nature. Metal already, so if you look at copper, zinc, aluminium, all-time high, okay, their prices. So automatically their companies manufacturing also are nearly all-time high. So very, very clearly, it's cyclical in nature. They have run for last 24 months. That's about it. Maybe you have a runway for next 6 months, and you are absolutely right. It's cyclical business because it's debt ridden. It's at some point in time when the economy cools down, the global economy cools down, it accepts the new normal. Automatically, the demand for the commodities also will come down. The prices also will come down, and the stock prices also will come down. So very, very clearly, it is only an opportunistic call for people who want to quickly make money. But large part of the free money in the metals is already made and gone. In fact, this is the time to actually go back to your table, take away the money which you have, and get into all the other sectors which we discussed right now.
Okay. I see in recent time, many of the reports which comes from Ambit, it started talking about this consumer electronic theme. Okay. So why are you guys so bullish now on that theme?
So consumer electronics actually forms part of the consumer discretionary business, right? Now think about it. Earlier, you had only one smartphone. Only the father had a smartphone. And if your wife is not working, she may just have a landline or a small phone. That's about it. Today, if you're four in a family, you have all of them have a smartphone. If the child is above 7 or 8 years old, plus at least 3 laptops. Earlier, people used to have fans, the stationary fans. Then came coolers. Now nobody keeps coolers. You go into the hinterland, you go into the urban slums, you will see air conditioners. Fridge, 30 years back, it was a big thing. Today, it's a utility. And remember, as the households will keep migrating, which we spoke in our conversation, from the poor to the middle class and upper middle class, their basic requirement will be first to acquire these consumer discretionary things. Because remember, when we started our journey post-independence, we were struggling for survival. What our grandfather, great-grandfather saw, they worked hard, toiled hard only for survival. Our parents literally created gave us education, and they were very, very hardworking, but they were striving for standard of living.
Yeah.
Now, for them, all these things were luxury. Now, these luxuries for us, for you and me, are utility. For next generation, it will become hygiene. That's why today, even in the remotest corner of the country, you have a dish TV, you have an antenna. Everywhere you have flat TVs. So very, very clearly, electronic and electronic consumption because of this pandemic has actually moved up by 4x. And think about it. People say energy crisis, energy crisis. The energy crisis has actually happened because of that. Earlier, people were not. Today, you are charging day and night at least 5 or 6 instruments perpetually. Earlier, that wasn't the case. So very, very clearly, now if there are 3 people studying and talking, while it's in an office, it's a collective air conditioning. There's economies of scale.
I have one add-on question to that, Mr. Siddharth. See, this consumer electronic FMEG segment had a demand in last 10 years as well, though there could be different kind of products used to get sold. But problem is in last 10, 15 years or last 2 decades, what we saw is global companies actually dominated Indian market, and many of our Indian players actually they're in verge of getting out of business or they were struggling. Okay,
Correct.
now I can see many PMSs, people like you started talking about FMEG as a segment. What change happened in Indian companies? Now you guys are bullish on. Why do you think these our Indian companies can give competition to global players and survive or not survive, grow from here?
So 3 very basic things have happened. The last decade or last to last decade, I would say, of the electronic companies, these guys had a very challenging time in terms of the technology. So the consumption was relatively modest. The segment which was the affordability was only to the higher end and to the upper class. Now, these are the guys, domestic companies, they couldn't either get a technology partner. So something which happened in the motorcycle, and that's where in last 30, 40 years, the two-wheeler industry changed, right? Because the technology exchange happened seamlessly. However, in electronics, it never happened. The FDI came, FDI brought the CKUs, they assembled. They didn't manufacture in India, they assembled and they sold at a high end. So they made almost 100% margin. People bought those things only with relatively modest demand because there was a guarantee. The Sonys of the world got sold comfortably, and the other local brands were not sold because the longevity or the life was lesser.
Okay.
Today, what has happened? The expectation in the mind. So how long do you think your smartphone gets changed? Every 1.5 to 2 years at best.
Yeah.
Earlier, the phone didn't change even for 10 years. The TV didn't change for 7 years. Today, nobody expects. So that's number one change. So the mindset has changed that. So consumption has increased multifold. Second, now, earlier, there were multiple parts which were manufactured and then assembled. Today, in a TV, you have only 3-4 parts. Your speaker is manufactured by X. Your integrated circuit is manufactured by one. Your screen is manufactured by one, and then there is a body which is you assemble and it's done. So everybody is specialized. So the Indian guys, they have local expertise of procuring all these items. Earlier, these verticals were not available, and everything had to be done by a local guy, and they were not having expertise. Because of that, their system collapsed. That's why the quality was poor. Today, even an Indian brand, so think about it, Chroma. A Chroma TV lasts for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You're happy. It is coming half the cost as compared to LG.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the revolutionary shift, because you have 5-6 as a technology progress, you have realized that it's only an assembly job. All your 5 components can be procured locally, and they have expertise in that. You bring them, assemble, put your brand, move on in life.
Okay. That's fantastic. Guys, before I close this session, many of you might not be reading the Disruptor series. It is an awesome series which they are running. It is available for everybody. You go to Ambit website, you can read that PDF. It's a detailed coverage they offer in that each series. And first of all, thanks a lot, Mr. Siddharth, for keeping it open for everybody that reports. They are really fantastic. And last before Disruptor series, I remember you were talking about a EV in two-wheeler, right?
Correct.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What kind of disruption you see in that EV two-wheeler segment, Mr. Siddharth?
What we believe is the way India is gearing up. So you realize that China has been doing it, but the problem that China is again facing is the closed economy, right? Because wherever the government intervention will be there, it will be challenging. What we see is India has always been ahead in the curve in terms of two-wheelers. So India has been, you look at, there is not a second industry barring information technology where India is a net exporter from day one. Two-wheelers and information technology, right? Two-wheelers, we got the technology way in advance, and we have moved ahead, and we are the global exporters. Whether it is Africa, whether it is Middle East, whether it is Far East, everywhere, our two-wheelers are sold throughout the world, barring maybe Japan, barring maybe China. Everywhere else, and South Korea, few nations, Taiwan. So some bit of Southeast Asia, that's about it. Everywhere else, we are able to export. Now, that's the beauty. Similarly, what we expect that the scale which India can produce, because India is gearing up to have large number of two-wheelers for their domestic consumption. And when anybody looks at India with nearly 65 crore youth, and every household having at least one two-wheeler, very, very distinctly, the scale is very high. And once you have the scale and the technology in place, then you start looking at the global market. Because if it is not sold in the world, it definitely can get sold in India. So what I see in the EV market, especially for the two-wheelers, India will become one of the biggest disruptors. And already we are seeing that the Ola factory, which is the largest factory in the EV two-wheeler space, and we will continue to see more and more players coming into this space. Think about it, e-rickshaws, we are already the largest manufacturer and consumer. E-rickshaws, so e-three-wheelers. We are already, so even if you go to a rural Bihar, a very, very small city in Bihar, or in Jharkhand, or in Orissa, or even in a Varanasi, any location, you would constantly see e-rickshaws within the city. And they last for 8 hours, you charge them, they work beautifully well.
Okay. ఇంటర్వ్యూకి యాక్చువల్ నేను సిద్ధార్థ్ గారిది హాఫ్ అన్ అవర్ టైం అడిగాను, బట్ కానీ ఇంట్రెస్టింగ్ అనిపించి క్వశ్చన్స్ అడుగుతున్నాను, ఆయన ఆన్సర్ చేస్తున్నారు. ఆయన ఏదైతే డీప్ డేటా షేర్ చేశారో దాంతో యాక్చువల్లీ ఇంటర్వ్యూ దగ్గర 1.5 hours అయితే జరిగింది. కాకపోతే ఇప్పుడు మీరు ఏదైతే పార్ట్ చూసారో ఇది అందరికీ ఈజీగా అర్థమయ్యే పార్ట్. మిగిలిన పార్ట్ ఏదైతే ఉన్నదో ఇది డీప్ డేటా. మనం ఈ $10 trillion ఎకానమీ ఎలా రీచ్ అవుతాం అన్న దాని మీద ఆ రోడ్ మ్యాప్ని కూడా వాళ్ళు షేర్ చేశారు. వాళ్ళ అంబిట్ ప్రెజెంటేషన్లో సిద్ధార్థ రస్తగి గారు షేర్ చేశారు. అండ్ అలాగే నేను ఇంకొన్ని క్వశ్చన్స్ కూడా అడిగాను. కాకపోతే డీప్ డేటా అందరూ అంత ఇంట్రెస్ట్ చూపించారు కాబట్టి దాన్ని ఎడిటింగ్లో పక్క తీసాం. ఒకవేళ మీకు ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఉన్నట్టయితే చెప్పండి, నేను మీకు శాంపిల్ చూపిస్తాను. ఇప్పుడు నాది ఏదైతే టాక్ అయిపోయిన తర్వాత మీకు ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఉన్నట్టయితే చెప్పండి, మీకు ఏదో ఒక మూడ్లో ఆ డేటాను కూడా షేర్ చేయడానికి ప్రయత్నిస్తాను. అందరూ పెద్దగా ఇంట్రెస్ట్ చూపించారు కదా అని చెప్పి ఆ పార్ట్ని మేము ఎడిటింగ్లో పక్కకి తీసాం. From the retail who saw this data, see many people who are watching this video they are investors. They are not from the finance industry to understand all this content. End of the day, why they watch this content? So that they can upgrade themselves, they can get that conviction. But end of the day, their point is, yeah, this data is good, but where should I invest? So Mr. Siddharth, you mean to say in coming next 5 years or 10 years, whatever period, you see internet-based companies will be part of Index?
Let's look at what are the building blocks which are needed if we need to reach this $10 trillion economy mark. So the first thing is,
The 1 hour, I don't know how it has completed. Not 1 hour, actually, it's 1.5 hour. I don't know. The conversation really went on well, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure my viewers will have a lot of content to take back home and work on their portfolios. I'm sure this data will help them a lot. Thank you for taking out your time.
thank you, Sai. Thank you for giving us opportunity to be at the Money Purse and have this good conversation. In fact, if your investors have any questions, maybe you can compile all of them at a point in time, email it to me or call me, and I will be happy to answer all their questions. Because the idea is, as I said, I genuinely mean it, that every Indian should invest so that they can come out of this average life and have goodness of life which Indian economy is providing to them.
నేను మీకు ఇంటర్వ్యూలో చెప్పాను కదా, మన ఛానల్లో 2 years బ్యాక్ నేను ఒక వీడియోని అప్లోడ్ చేశాను చూడండి అని. ఆ వీడియో ఇక్కడ ఎండ్ కార్డ్లో వస్తే తప్పకుండా చూడడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి. ఆ వీడియో చూసినట్టయితే ఈ వీడియోలో ఏదైతే ఇంగ్లీష్లో డిస్కషన్ జరిగిందో దానికి మీకు తెలుగులో సమరీ దొరికేస్తుంది. క్రిస్ప్ యాక్చువల్లీ కాన్సెప్ట్ మీకు ఈజీగా దొరికేస్తుంది అందులోని, ఆ 2 years బ్యాక్ వీడియో ఏదైతే ఉన్నదో. అండ్ దట్స్ ఇట్ ఫర్ టుడేస్ ఇంటర్వ్యూ. అండ్ ఈ ఇంటర్వ్యూ మీకు హెల్ప్ఫుల్ ఇప్పటివరకు వీడియోని లైక్ చేయనట్టయితే వీడియోని తప్పకుండా లైక్ చేయండి. అండ్ ఈ వీడియో మీ ఫ్రెండ్స్ అండ్ ఫ్యామిలీ మెంబర్స్కి హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అవుతుందంటే వాళ్ళకి తప్పకుండా షేర్ చేయండి. అండ్ మీరు ఈక్విటీ మార్కెట్స్లో కొత్తగా వచ్చి మీకు మార్కెట్ గురించి ఏం తెలియనట్టయితే బేసిక్స్ మీద మన ఛానల్లో ఒక కంప్లీట్ సిరీస్ని ఆల్రెడీ అప్లోడ్ చేశాను. ఇక్కడ ఎండ్ కార్డ్లో వస్తుంది, చూడడానికి ప్రయత్నించండి. దట్స్ ఆల్ అబౌట్ టుడేస్ వీడియో గైస్. అండ్ మీరు ఛానల్ సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేయనట్టయితే ఇక ఛానల్ లోగో మీద క్లిక్ చేసి ఛానల్ సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేస్తూ పక్కన బెల్ ఐకాన్లోని ఆల్ నోటిఫికేషన్స్ యాక్టివేట్ చేసుకోండి. నేను సాయి కృష్ణపత్రి మరొక ఇంట్రెస్టింగ్ వీడియోతో కలుస్తాను. టిల్ దెన్ హ్యావ్ ఫన్.